perhaps just start out by saying, and hopefully my 10 minutes haven't started yet, that up until about 2 weeks ago, we were going to present a totally different paper, which was on innovative mixed methods approach to monitoring and evaluating community-based crime and violence prevention projects. And then we figured that we're going before lunch, and the first thing that's going to put people to sleep is the mentioning of monitoring and evaluation. Throw learning in there, and, well, actually, perhaps the only learning we have is that we've learned to bring back up for when I make a total hash of it. So, I think we kind of moved from the monitoring and evaluation idea to speaking about a project. We're not speaking about research, we're speaking about a project, so kind of what we hope is going to be. And we made it quite dramatic in the program because I'm not sure if there's anybody from Nelson Mandela Bay here, but we thought we'd just title the presentation The Future of Nelson Mandela Bay. So speaking about being prophetic, well, there you go. I'm just going to talk about a project that, as I say, is in its very early stages. It's a project that we're implementing in partnership between CJCP, the Gender Health Justice Research Unit, Lily Arts here, and an organization that's based in Nelson Mandela Bay called the Masifunda Learner Development. It's a project that's taken about 2 years to evolve thus far, and it has another at least 5 years ahead of it. We really are in the, as I say, planning stage now, where we're setting up our research tools, our baseline, our sort of design steps. And I think one thing that would be really great to come out of the conversations that we have here is to bounce ideas and to get ideas and actually to see where, because we're talking about a big project here, and it would be great to get feedback and input from the sort of wealth of expertise that exists and that sits in this room. So perhaps just to say that as well. And if I'm talking too fast, it's because it's a bit like trying to fit a long proposal into the word counts that donors give you, to try and keep everything going. I'm not going to say too much about the conceptual framework. It's informed very much by the work of academics like Farrington and Welsh. I was going to throw in there socio-ecological model. I was going to throw in multi-systemic approach. I was going to throw in life course offending. All of this work has informed the design of this project. We recognize that in order to deal with violence, we need to adopt a life course approach. We recognize that a young person and child exists within multiple domains, and we need to look at interventions across each of those domains: the individual, the family, the school, the community. And I think one of the challenges that we have in this kind of work is that often we do great parenting work with this group of kids, and then we do great work in schools, in these schools over here, and then we do great work around building local government's capacity. Okay, let's say we do some work around building local government's capacity, but we never bring these pieces together. And so what we're trying to do is exactly that, and bring all these pieces together into a specific site. As I said, the project's evolved. The discussion started about 2 years ago. About 18 months ago, we received money from a funder, Comic Relief in the UK, to do a scoping exercise at Nelson Mandela Bay, to try and see to sort of tease out what priorities were, what major issues were, start collecting some background information. We use a combination of quantitative, qualitative methodologies. I'm not going to go into that now for the scoping exercise, because it really is just a sort of background piece. Just to give you some idea of those who don't know Nelson Mandela Bay, this is some of the data. 34% of the population are under the age of 18. Less than a fifth live with, just over a fifth live with both parents, of children live with both parents. 30.6% of kids around 18 years of age have completed schooling, secondary schooling. 36.6% live in a household with no employed adult. 78.1% live under the poverty line. 60.8% have experienced crime or violence at schools. That's from some of our other research we've conducted. 47.5% have been exposed to violence in the community, and 51.2% report crime as common in their neighborhood. I should just perhaps, there's a word missing there, those last two statistics relate specifically to children. So it's 47.5% of children have been exposed to violence in their community, and 51.2% report that crime is common in the neighborhood. So that gives you an idea of the sort of community that we're focusing on. There's a bit of a misnomer here as well, because we're not just looking at the whole of Nelson Mandela Bay. We're zooming into one particular part of Nelson Mandela Bay, and that's Walmer Township, which, for those of you that know, it's pretty much just neighboring the airport as you fly into PE. So based on research that we've done and our experience and experience we've had in implementing other projects, as I say, we wanted to bring together a comprehensive project focusing on all the different aspects that come out of our baseline research as being needed and come out of the scoping exercise in one particular site and try and see what we can achieve in 5 years. And so perhaps the next most boring thing to monitoring and evaluation before lunch is for me to sit and read through a list of objectives and outcomes, but I'm afraid that's what I'm going to do. So I just hope that you take something interesting out of that. Our overall objective for the program, and I need to read this verbatim, is to improve development pathways for children and increase levels of safety and well-being at home and at school for children in Nelson Mandela Bay metro area, while contributing to an evidence-based knowledge of what works in preventing violence against children. So you get out of that, our primary focus is looking at children and youth. This project's being funded by 2 different funders, one of which has a specific focus on children, one of which has a more focused attention on youth, and so we bring them together, not least because of the life course underpinnings of our approach. Our specific outcome, what we are trying to achieve in those 5 years, is, other than trying to change the world, or Nelson Mandela Bay, is the safety of well-being of children and youth of school-going age in the identified site through building young people's resilience to violence and improving individual and institutional capacity to care for children, and through the creation of safe and caring environments. And the reason that I have to read it out verbatim is that I constantly have to remind myself of each one of those, each sort of part of that, because we're focusing on the individual through building resilience, improving institutional capacity to care and protect children, and we're focusing on the creation of safe and caring environments. So all these different aspects come together. I hope I'm making sense. If I'm not, I am happy. There'll be lots of discussion afterwards, hopefully. Okay, so in order to achieve this outcome, we have set ourselves 10 specific objectives. The first is school-based, and it's to essentially facilitate safe and caring school environments which make learners feel safe throughout the whole lived school experience. And we say the whole lived school experience because it's around not just what happens in the classroom, but what happens to and from school. What happens to all the experiences that are attached for children to the school experience, okay? This is one particular demographic. We know that out-of-school youth and out-of-school children kind of often fall outside of these parameters, and we'll get to that a bit later. What we're trying to do in order to achieve the specific school-based outcome is to focus on learner participation, learner voices, making sure that processes are learner-driven, to make sure that schools are effectively managed for safety, are well managed, and that they have the adequate response system in place to deal with cases of violence. So focusing on violence and on prevention and response within the school. That's the school intervention that we're working on. The second is to enhance the capacity of at-risk families and caregivers to provide support for their children. Now, what we've done in this right-hand column is just select some of the specific outcomes for each of these objectives that we're working towards. We actually have more than this, but again, just trying to get a sort of high-level idea across of what we're doing. In terms of our families and caregiver work, we're looking at a home visitation scheme. What we're really trying to do is make sure that caregivers provide caring, nurturing environments for children and practice positive parenting at home. It's going to be through a combination of home-based work, group work, whole range of different interventions there. The third outcome, to improve the capacity of local service providers, including ECD practitioners, to deliver quality service. And this is something that we've realized through our own experience has been very important. You can provide direct services, but in terms of sustainability, you need to build the capacity of ECD service providers and other service providers to provide those services to a high standard once your involvement comes to an end. And so we have a specific objective there. The fourth, and this is both an objective, but it cuts through all the other work as well, to integrate the use of innovative technologies, including child-focused ICTs and social medias, into everyday service delivery activities. And that's looking at how we integrate ICTs into service delivery, but also how do you integrate ICTs into reporting processes, into data collection processes that are ongoing, that aren't just reliant on, your external research and your internal research processes. How do you generate data through ICTs in a way that children engage with and sort of ongoing process? Our fifth objective is to improve the extent and quality of child protection response services to child victims of violence. We know that we have some of the best child protection legislation in the world. We know there are some issues with it, but we also know that the system is effectively, anybody from DSD here, is effectively flawed, the implementation of it, shall we say. Okay, so how do we work to improve the response system? How do we work to make sure that when children experience violence, when cases are reported, the child protection system, and that cuts across the criminal justice system, the DSDs, it cuts across. Okay. The sixth objective, I did say this was either boring or ambitious, to raise awareness at a community and institutional level of the role of communities, families, and caregivers in protecting children from violence. Okay, and this for me is actually one of going to be one of the most difficult, because you're talking about changing norms and you're changing perceptions. Okay, it's not just changing perceptions, but how does that change in perception translate into behavior change as well at a community level? Major challenge. There's lots of experience we can draw on from some of the HIV/AIDS work, sexual reproductive health work, but that I think is going to be one of the most challenging areas that we're going to be working in. The seventh is to facilitate greater power over the choices and decision-making processes amongst out-of-school youths, particularly females. And this was, again, something that's come out of previous project work that we've done. It's great working with parents, great working with schools. You get kids, you improve educational outcomes, and then so what? They can't go anything. They can't go anywhere from school. So how do you work with out-of-school youth and kids coming through the matric system to make sure that they have a path in front of them to follow? Yeah. Okay, the eighth objective, to reduce the use and abuse of alcohol and substance abuse by way of social and health interventions. We've got specific outcomes there. I'm not going through all of these specific outcomes. Our ninth objective is out-of-school children and youth and school leavers have access to information and future opportunities available. Okay, so how do we link them? It's not just about the choices and the decisions they make and building self-efficacy, etc., but then how do we practically link them to opportunities? So how do we link them to further training, mentorships? How do we feed them into the workplace? How do we link them up with further training, educational opportunities? And then finally, but one that I could speak all day on, our 10th objective is to generate reliable, rigorous evidence on what works in child protection to inform policy. Okay. We have a very rigorous M&E framework set up around this. We are fortunate enough to have funding to do 2 randomized control trials as part of this project. We obviously have specific research instruments and different M&E tools built into some of these specific objectives, but we're also looking at shared outcomes and shared indicators across those. So a very complex research process that's attached to that. And I think it's very much about how do we learn from this? How do we test? How do we see how all these pieces fit together? We see how they fit together, how they exist individually. How do we test how they work together? And how can we feed that into provincial and national policy? We're quite fortunate in that this does link to other processes that are underway. The development of the provincial safety strategy and the white paper on safety and security, which I think this fits firmly into, and which I think the Secretariat is going to speak to on Friday as well. And so there's a real link, or possible link, between this at a site level and various policy processes at a provincial and national level. Sorry. I'll leave it at that.